Occupy Wall Street goes to Washington. Today, protesters started a three-day weekend occupation at Freedom Plaza near the White House. The protests that started 21 days ago, organized through Twitter, without a leader and unaffiliated with any political or advocacy group, now have the attention of Washington politicians. Dozens of Democrats have voiced their support for the protesters. The Congressional Progressive Caucus issued this statement. We share the anger and frustration of so many Americans who have seen the enormous toll that an unchecked Wall Street has taken on the overwhelming majority of Americans while benefiting the super wealthy. We stand with the American people as they demand corporate accountability, and we support their use of peaceful means to improve America. House Republican leader Eric Cantor, not surprisingly, had a different reaction, speaking at the Values Voters Summit today in Washington.
I, for one, am increasingly concerned about the growing mobs occupying Wall Street and the other cities across the country. And believe it or not, some in this town have actually condoned the pitting of Americans against Americans.
Cantor, of course, pits Americans against Americans for a living and raised no objections to any of the protest demonstrations by people calling themselves Tea Partiers, including the demonstrations he participated in. This morning, the September jobs report was released, showing the economy added 103,000 jobs last month, and now with more complete information and data, it also revised the net job creation number for August from the pathetic 0 that we had earlier reported. It was revised upward to 57,000. The national unemployment rate remains 9.1%, a problem the president says Republicans have offered no real solution for.
Their big economic plan to put people back to work right now is to roll back financial protections, eliminate the EPA. I mean, here's a good question. Here's a little homework assignment for folks. Go ask the Republicans what their jobs plan is if they're opposed to the American Jobs Act, and have it scored, have it assessed by the same independent economists that assessed our jobs plan. I'll be interested in the answer. I think everybody here, I see some smirks in the audience because you know that it's not going to be real robust.
Joining me now is Robert Reich, former labor secretary in the Clinton administration. He's now a professor of public policy at the University of California at Berkeley and the author of Aftershock. Thanks for joining me tonight, Bob.
Good evening, Lawrence.
That was a really fun CBO joke the president just told about scoring the Republicans' bill. I'm not sure most Americans could quite get it, but what he's really saying is they haven't really proposed anything. And if you tried to bring it to CBO, CBO wouldn't be able to say that the Republicans would be creating any jobs.
Exactly. I mean, the Republicans' idea about creating jobs is basically shrink government. And somehow, by shrinking government, you get more jobs. Although most Americans understand that shrinking government means fewer teachers, firefighters, fewer social workers, fewer police officers, fewer government contractors, fewer people who are working for all the government contractors. So it's hard to imagine how, by any scoring or any logic, it is possible to understand how shrinking government is going to create jobs.
The president's news conference yesterday seemed to, at a certain level, up the anxiety level for him. I mean, he seemed to be saying, look, this economy, it could go very badly if we don't do something very quickly. This is a very tricky spot for the president to be in because, of course, he doesn't want to say anything that shakes confidence in any way, but at the same time, he somehow has to inspire urgency. How should he do that?
Well, I think doing it exactly the way he's done it, and that is by being very clear with the American people about the magnitude of the problem, but also optimistic that if we take steps, we can overcome this problem. I mean, 103,000 new jobs for September may sound pretty good, but you need 125,000 just to keep up with the growth of the population. So we are still in the hole. We may be making a little progress, but the hole is getting deeper even as we are climbing out. The president needs a jobs plan. America needs a jobs plan. It's not going to go very far. Most of the analysis of this jobs plan says it's going to create maybe 2 million jobs. Remember, we have 25 million Americans who are in search of full-time employment, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And Republicans continue to say, as they have for years now, no.
Robert Samuelson, in his economics column in the Washington Post, made an interesting point about the mood. He says we're in a rotten mood. He says the consumer now is in the opposite condition of irrational exuberance that was once talked about, that pushed up the housing market and all of that. And we're now in a kind of irrational negative take on where we really are with this economy. What is the rational take on where we are with this economy?
Well, it is rational for consumers to hold back now, Lawrence. Consumers, remember, 1 out of 4 people who have a mortgage are underwater, owing more on their home than their homes are worth. Housing prices, and homes are the major asset for most people. Housing prices are down 35% from what they were in 2006. And people are worried about losing their jobs if they haven't lost them already. And plus, the median wage and family income continue to decline, adjusted for inflation. Well, it is completely rational under these circumstances for people to hold back, to save, to try to scrimp, to remove and reduce discretionary spending. There's nothing irrational about this. But from the standpoint of the economy as a whole, obviously we suffer because businesses are not going to create new jobs or expand, regardless of how low interest rates are, unless consumers are going to buy.
Former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.